Hey everyone, Corteri here. I'm not really a tech or hardware review guy, I barely do my game reviews well enough, but I wanted to talk to you about this awesome little piece of tech. This is the Miyoo Mini, and it's one of the most amazing handheld emulator consoles I've ever seen, particularly for the price, which hovers around $50 to $60 US. To be fair, the only other handheld emulator console I've ever owned was an Anbernic RG280M, so I don't have much to compare it to, but that doesn't make the console less awesome, it just makes my review less credible. So let's begin. One of the big reasons I like this thing, aside from the price, is the classic Game Boy design. This thing is clearly going for that up and down aesthetic, and for anyone that grew up with an old school Game Boy or Game Boy Color, it's gonna be a big plus over other handhelds purely for the nostalgia factor. Also, this thing is pretty small. I've read the size being comparable to a pack of cigarettes, which sounds about right. Despite the size and weight, it just feels right in my hands. I don't have much trouble holding it and pressing the buttons, though sometimes I will have to switch my hands' positions when they get tired. I don't have huge hands, they're pretty average size, but you can easily play this thing with one hand depending on the game. These come in 4 color schemes: SNES, Famicom, Clear Black, or Clear Blue. I got the SNES because that's all that was available, which works out because I had an SNES, not a Famicom. Aside from the on and off buttons and the menu button, it has A, B, X, Y buttons and a D-pad, start and select buttons, and 2 L and 2 R buttons that are tucked away in the back, much like the Anbernic RG351V. All of the buttons feel solid, they don't feel loose or sticky. The volume is controlled by a very nice wheel that reminds me of the classic Game Boy, and the speaker in the corner is pretty powerful for its size. There's also a headphone jack on the bottom if you're like me and still own wired headphones, next to the micro SD card slot and the USB-C port. On the subject of micro SD cards, the console comes with a shitty one, along with an equally shitty micro SD converter. My advice is to replace these with better ones as soon as possible. The build quality, in my opinion, is pretty solid, especially for the low price. It feels very legit, like you bought a real Game Boy and not just a cheap 1,000 games in one emulator. Don't get me wrong, you don't ever want to drop this thing, it just feels too small and delicate. But in its defense, you wouldn't want to drop any of your electronics on the ground anyway. I have actually dropped this thing accidentally on hardwood floors from my desk pretty violently, and it still worked. But I have read of people who have dropped theirs in a less dramatic manner and their screen went out. Also, there seems to be the tiniest bit of texture on it, which is nice. Unless there's not and I'm being crazy. I just want to quickly complain about this battery. I don't want to seem lazy or like I can't handle plugging in wires, but it would have been nice to have a battery without wiring that simply slips in. Speaking of the battery, it would seem a great deal of the console's weight comes from the battery. The screen is a 2.8 IPS display, so it has a very wide viewing angle. It looks really nice for how small it is, giving it a crisp look. I'm so used to giant screens because of our phones nowadays that I forget how good things can look on a smaller screen. The system uses a 1.2 GHz dual-core SSD 202D CPU, along with a 2D graphics accelerator GPU. I have no idea what either of those things means, but I can certainly attest to the console's strength. I haven't really experienced any serious drops in frames per second thus far, even on PS1 titles. It comes with 128 megabytes of RAM. The battery is a 1900 mAh removable battery. How long does that last? I usually can get a solid 3 hours before it starts hovering at less than 10%. But I mostly play Pokemon, and the battery could go out quicker when playing more demanding systems. Here are all of the consoles that the Miyoo Mini can run. It's still shocking to me that I can play PlayStation 1 titles on this tiny little thing, and so smoothly when back in the day I needed a console, the wiring, the TV, and the disc. I mean, the battery is heavier than the hardware, it's mind-blowing. The stock firmware is nice enough by itself and not in any way bad, but I've upgraded mine to use Onion OS, a free firmware upgrade that I'll put a link to in the description. The upgrade process is pretty simple. I'm not the brightest person, and even I was able to piece it together eventually. But it does carry the risk of bricking the device, so make sure you follow the instructions to a T. The two reasons I wanted to upgrade the firmware was the custom themes and an easy-to-access fast-forward function. Like I said, I mostly just use the Mini to play older Pokemon titles, and they can get a little grindy without this function. So next I wanted to show off a bit of gameplay as a demonstration. Now I only use some of the systems that the Miyoo Mini can play, so if your favorite system or game isn't included, I'm terribly sorry.
Stop!
Okay, so that was the Miyoo Mini. Affordable, powerful, and portable. One thing I want to bring up before I end the video is earlier I said it was easy to hold in my hands, and it is, but one problem I face is using the shoulder buttons. Sometimes my index fingers slip off of the shoulder buttons when I try pressing them. So instead I have to use them to hold the top of the Miyoo for leverage, while I use my middle fingers to press the shoulder buttons. Not a big deal, but just so people know. I totally recommend this handheld if you're into emulation, classic handhelds, or even just classic video games. Or if you've been thinking about buying a handheld emulator but don't want to drop $80 to $200 for something you might only use while taking a shit. Anywho, thanks for watching. I hope I was able to help you decide whether to buy one or not. If you did already order one, hopefully this was fun to watch while you wait for yours. Good luck to you once it arrives. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.